philosophy, questioning, enlightenment, deep conversation, spirituality. This is the spiritual download.
There's still this drive to, be stronger, be more fit, be better looking. Like there's always that thought in the back of my mind. It's kind of, I've been thinking about, looking in the mirror lately, and there's two levels. One level is like fully accepting who you are right now, because like your human body is like the perfect mechanism for waking up and connecting with God. So loving your central nervous system, loving your bloodstream, all that stuff is so important. Yet on another level, there's that drive to be better looking, to be better, to be stronger, to run more, all that stuff.
Yeah. I mean, you definitely, I agree. You have to love your body to some capacity, in order to project the best version of yourself. When we last spoke, we spoke about empowerment, and it just makes me think of our society and how looks are so important in society, and how that disempowers so many people because they're given a reference point to how they should look. Like for me and my skinny body, I thought when I was younger that I wasn't supposed to have the skinny body based on what everyone told me.
Yeah, there's that emphasis for men to be buff, and for girls to be like that, to be skinny or have that hourglass figure. Really, what that is, though, what I see is that it's an ideal. It's something. I mean, there isn't no reason that we strive to be beautiful. I think there's an amazing drive, a big purpose for human beauty. I think I just don't know. I don't know if it's. I don't know if that's for everybody, which is very interesting. I mean, that might be part of this 80-20 rule, where like in different abilities that humans have, or different arenas of striving, usually 20% of people are adept at it, and the other 80% are learners of it, or are not even interested, nor are interested in having skills in that type of skill set. So I'm wondering if beauty is something that maybe is not for everyone, or but it's still like human beauty is something that everybody appreciates.
It does seem, yeah, it seems to be something that people appreciate, even if the individual observer has let themselves go, so to speak, they themselves can still appreciate another's beauty. But yeah, I guess beauty is in the eye of the beholder too. Beauty is different for everyone. But I know from experience that I've known some really beautiful women, and they are insecure, or they judge themselves, way too much. And good-looking guys, it doesn't matter. It's you can be super, super good looking from a conventional standpoint, but it seems like those people are just as insecure on some levels. So when you think about that, it's just kind of like, okay, well, maybe this is just a waste of time, really. Reaching this peak perfection of beauty, external beauty, it just doesn't seem to be achieved, because as soon as you level up into another level of acceptance, self-acceptance, there's like another level to obtain or another level to grab to.
Yeah, yeah. And it's also the same with money and power. Like there's always more beauty, more money, more power to be had. So at what point, are you going to stop judging yourself? Because really it's about yourself. We don't need to listen to society. How do you feel in your own body, right? And when we're honest and open about how we feel in our bodies, we love ourselves. Our nature is to love ourselves, no matter what we look like in the moment. That doesn't mean that maybe you're one of those people like me who have a drive to get better, be better, stronger, faster, and being able to go on those hikes that you want, right? Like training so that you can go and do the things that you love.
But you have such a thought-provoking mind, and I love it.
Thanks.
Um, I love it. Honestly, I love it, dude. I mean, I have friends, but I don't have friends like you that think the way you do. And I'm just kind of fascinated by the way you think. And I think maybe it's just also because I don't have a lot of philosophy friends or people interested in philosophy or spirituality. So it's really nice to talk to someone like you. So let me ask you this. You've got this channel called The Spiritual Download. And how long have you been doing this channel?
I've been doing it for about 3 years. Now, the first couple of videos I did were just kind of off the cuff. I was into writing at that time and literature. So I was writing poems, and I also read off like all of these notes that I took my senior year of my philosophy major. I took a bunch of notes. My goal was to write down the biggest questions in philosophy, and just so I had 15 pages of that, and I tried to record it all, but then I only got to like a page and a half. So those are some of my older videos. But then I really got into meditation and spirituality little by little, and I started to record about mindfulness. And that's when I came up with the name, the Library of Humanity. So I did basically Library of Humanity for about a year. About a year I did that. And that was more about philosophy and meditation. I was still exploring a lot at that time.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So was there a catalyst, you'd say, 3 years ago when when you started or decided to start the Spiritual Download?
The catalyst was this, is after I was in Ecuador, which I was in Ecuador from 2015 and 2016, I wanted to share my experiences. I thought that I've always believed that my purpose in life was to live life fully. I've always had this drive. So even when I was a kid, I played a lot of sports and I did it fully. I put a lot of my energy and my heart into playing sports. And then it was travel. In college, it was travel. I put my heart and soul into that, and ended up, living in Ecuador, learning Spanish. And then I was like, man, like my story, everyone's story is interesting. Everybody's story is interesting. So I was like, so is mine. Mine is interesting. I want to share it. I want to share my story. So I started just recording. I always thought like I would be doing a journal, but a journal is not really for me. I do a little blogging on my website, but really I like to talk.
So it sounds like you were always this way. You just decided to start sharing it with the world or sharing it in a different capacity.
In Ecuador, I was teaching English, and that's where I learned my passion and my talent for communicating my thoughts through speaking in front of groups. So I figured out that like, man, I can be fearless. It's an option to be fearless if at your job. So no matter what your job is, mine happens to be teaching. I've had less and less fear of how I teach and what I teach. So teaching from my heart is all I want to do. That's like, I feel like that's my dharma. It's my path in life, is to share who I am and what I've experienced and what I've learned and the mistakes I've made, because there's something that is inherent in my story that is natural with everybody. Anybody could connect with my story because they are human and I am human. So connecting on that human level, which I've come to know, is in the heart. I used to think it was in the mind. The mind is part of it. The mind is an awesome tool. I'll never disparage the mind, because I identify as a philosopher. But the heart is how all humans, all animals, and all plants, that's how we're connected. That's how we're connected. So
Yeah, you talk about heart a lot, which I really enjoy, because I think that obviously needs to be highlighted more. And I'm curious, what do you think it is about the heart as a brain, as this energy information center? Obviously, the heart is beating us to life, so to speak, every second of the day, and it never takes a break. So it's incredibly resilient. To think that hearts have been beating in this universe since the dawn of time, or since the dawn of life forms, physical life forms, kind of blows my mind, and just in thinking about that infinite heartbeat, like it never dies. So yeah, that alone makes me think that it's super intelligent. This beat, if we're all one, I'm speaking, and we all have, separate hearts, but we're all one, there's going to be sort of a synapse network of heart connections going on throughout the whole universe, right? We could, hypothesize that. If we're all connected, how are we connected? How is the heart connected to everyone?
that's a really big question. So firstly is the physical heart. The physical heart is what gives us life. That's obvious to say, but really putting your attention. So it's the heart. The thing about the heart is it's not an idea. Almost everything else humans do is out of our mind. We come up with this idea in our mind, and we want that to happen in the future. Or we have this idea about the past that we maybe, and it tends to be regret, that we either did something we regret or did not do something that we regret. But the heart is giving us life always, forever, which is right now. The only thing that you can know is your heart right now for certain. So your physical heart is that which gives life to you, to me, to everything. So it's really important to appreciate that, because that's how we get connected with Earth too. So Earth is central to spirituality for me, and appreciating where we come from. Also, there's a spiritual heart too, which is the centerless center. What I mean by that is there's a certain level of consciousness which can be reached where you realize that everywhere is the center. Absolutely everything. And so you are also through your heart, your spiritual heart, your heart chakra, that is the center of the universe for you. So
like
everything, everybody is the center of the universe, which makes it centerless as well. Meaning that it's like, this is true in physics too, is that there actually is no center of the universe because it's expanding. So the universe is expanding, consciousness is expanding. And what the center is you can call it nothingness, you can call it potentiality, pure potentiality. It's basically where life is blooming out of, is that that centerless center, which is basically for us humans, that's our heart.
Wouldn't that also depend, you think, based on the reference of the observer, where the center would be?
There seems to be two observers. So for the human, it's much more practical to talk about human beings since we're human beings. So for the human, there is the ego or personality observer, like the senses, observing the world. So you, whatever you are, using your five senses to see the world or to sense the world. That is one way of observing, and that's actually creating the universe. In physics, they talk about observation, and literally like electrons go into position upon being observed by an observer.
So the universe doesn't really exist until it's being seen or observed by some sort of sentience.
I guess I'll call it capacity. So consciousness is this open capacity for life to exist. So we tend to think that consciousness or awareness comes from our brain and goes through our eyes, through our ears. But when you really dive into that, there's no duality anywhere. There is this open space, which it isn't even space because space happens inside of what I'm talking about. So I call it capacity because it's an open field for life to do its thing. And that's the ultimate observer. And we as humans are actually both the little observer, using our brains, basically, our central nervous system. But our central nervous system is inherently connected to God, if you want to call it God, or capacity, or pure openness, pure infinity, pure intelligence, where life is existence is existing.
Like quantum entanglement, quantum physics talks about particles communicating between vast distances, like light years. And in terms of consciousness, how do you think that applies? Quantum physics applied to human consciousness. Does that mean, do you think we can communicate with a space light years away?
We are communicating subconsciously with the entire universe all the time. We tend to think that what we are is this small aspect of ourselves, the human being, or what we call the human being, or the personality, like me, Kyle.
Yeah.
Right? And so when we believe that we are that limited thing, we think that we can't communicate with the rest of the universe.
Right.
Yeah.
It's very limiting. You're right. It's very limiting. And to me, I'm very suspicious of anything that is limiting in nature, because you and I both know that the universe is limitless. So why would anything that's projected as having limits benefit us? So I find that suspicious.
Ultimately, the purpose of believing in limits for the human being is for survival and for fear of death. So central to our life is the need to survive, which is completely connected with our spirituality. But also we fear death for lots of reasons, because we want our ego to continue to exist. However, fearing death is something that can be overcome. And that's probably the biggest step that we can take in our spirituality, is reaching this level of consciousness where you literally see it's impossible to die. Where, like, yes, Kyle will end, Josh will end, but that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about what we ultimately are, not dying, being it's impossible to die on that level.
We are our bodies. I think our bodies allow us to interact with the earth. Obviously, if we were just consciousness without form, we're not going to be able to tangibly interact with the earth, right? So it makes a lot of sense that we're in bodies, but I don't think we are these bodies. Do you?
Usually in spirituality, my answer is yes and no, which can be frustrating for people who want an answer, who want a logical answer. So yes, we are our bodies, which is awesome and beautiful, but also we're not, because we are much, much greater. We're so great that we ultimately are everything. One way of thinking about that is consumerism. So right now our society is obsessed with consumerism. I call it the fossil fuel fiesta. We're basically partying off of oil and coal. Well, no longer coal as much, luckily. But we're exploring what it's like to overcome things that we perceive as bad that the earth does to us humans. So we're trying to create this line, this barrier between us and our mom, our Mother Earth, which, I mean, Native Americans, indigenous people have always seen, not just believed, but literally their life is about that the earth is the mother. The earth is our mother. So when humans discovered, modern science, capitalism, coal and oil, and even before that, we could talk about kind of there's maybe three stages that happened for where we began to be disengaged with Earth. But that's how we got disconnected from Earth. So now we think that life is about consuming for us at the expense. We're really consuming at the expense of animals and plants, but for so long we didn't care because we thought we were not animals and plants. As you study science with an open heart and open mind, you see that we are, like, science is nature, science is animals and plants. It's impossible to actually find a logical barrier between us humans in the ecosystem with our ecosystem. Like, you can't say, okay, here is human beings separate from their ecosystem, and that the ecosystem ultimately is Earth, right? That's the large ecosystem. And even if you go expand the universe, but right now we're talking about life here on Earth.
It's good that we're all connected and we all realize that animals, plants, we are all connected. And in terms of survival, again, Mother Earth, and we all know this now, she's provided everything for us. We've got all this abundance of nature to provide all of our needs, basically. And we've got all these animals as well to sustain us. It just seems like we live in such an abundant world, and yet there's an illusion cast upon society that we are in scarcity to perpetuate consumerism. And that's an illusion that they give to us because we have to believe that in order to perpetuate consumerism. What do you think about that?
Part of it is human beings, there's so many of us now that, I mean, if you really study how ecosystems work, you'd have to argue that human beings are an invasive species now. If you look at how we construct our landscape, we turn it from natural forests into cornfields. We're stripping down tropical rainforests and putting on a palm oil or palm tree. I don't know what palm oil comes from, some sort of tree.
Yeah, the palm tree.
Palm trees, so palm oil. So we're doing that because we think that we need to do that in order for all of us to survive.
Right.
Now, this is the hard pill to swallow. Just the fact there are too many of us. So something is going to be drastically hurt by this imbalance on Earth. That's going to include everything, all animals. It's going to include animals, plants, and human beings. And that's how karma works. We made mistakes in the past. Now there's going to be consequences. And those consequences, young people are going to say, it was the baby boomers who did all the consumption. Well, on one level, yes, that's true. Okay. But also, our generation, millennials, were consuming equally as much, almost as much as baby boomers. But when you get out of that dichotomy as well, that mindset of like me and them, it's like the world economy is what we are ultimately. Like, you see that all of us humans are so vitally connected that you can't say it's hard to blame somebody else, because literally we are that person. And so we've made the mistake. We have that karma. That karma happened, and now that karma is like a pebble getting dropped on the pond, and the pond is the whole Earth. So you can't have karma in isolation for just yourself. No, the karma that we are creating is changing the world. Even so, it doesn't matter what size that karma is, whether it be climate change or just saying hello. All of that is in aggregate. So we're all living each other's karma, and we are creating that karma.
Yeah, karma, that's another big one. But I wanted to touch on the cornfield that you mentioned, the man that has to plow his field to grow the corn, to sell. That is a belief system. This man believes he has to make a living because he's told he has to. It's all kind of enforced, this illusion of scarcity and making money. It's not just about survival. You have to make food for yourself, but you have to make money to make food. And there's all these steps that kind of perpetuate this scarcity thing. And I think it comes down to belief system, don't you? You have to believe that there's too many of us, and therefore there's not enough to go around. And when you believe that, therefore it is, right? But if you believe that there is enough of us, it gives you more motivation to make things work for all human beings. So to me, it's quite obvious that it's a belief system, and they entrain us to believe that there's never enough. And I think this also might perpetuate greed in why people seem to make money and then just feel like it's never enough. There's this pill that they've swallowed where they feel like unsatisfied. They have to make more money. They have to consume more. They have to buy more. And yet it's all an illusion. And I think we all know this on a subconscious level, on an unconscious level. We all know that this is an illusion. And I know people who have moments where they just doubt all this stuff and say, all this consumerism, all this materialism is meaningless, really. It doesn't mean anything. People have those quiet moments in their life, but really those quiet moments are the truth. So what do you think is perpetuating this illusion on Earth? Because in terms of humanity stepping into its power and into its greater truth, humanity has to drop the illusion of surviving constantly. Because if we're constantly in a battle to survive, how can we ever step into our greater truth?
Yeah, absolutely. I would, to answer your question, I'm gonna have to change the word survival to comfort, maybe, because
Right.
survival could be very base survival too, which very base human survival through history. I mean, we're just living in the 0.1% of human history. So if you go back, 100,000 years, 10,000 years, our human survival actually did not kill Earth very much because, namely, we were hunter-gatherers,
Right.
and there were less than a billion people. There were less than 100 million people on
Mhm.
Earth for those thousands of years, until now we have this hockey stick graph, where it's like 100,000 years ago to 10,000 years ago, life was like the same for humans. Now all of a sudden agriculture is invented, makes it go like this, and then we discover fossil fuels, makes it go like this, like our population and our technology, our consumption, and then we create like the internet, and now we're like up here with numbers of people, how much we're consuming. So I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, are you talking about more like this side of the graph where we're exploiting the earth, over consuming, and stuff like that?
All this stuff that we believe over time, over generations of time, that we need then to sustain our survival. But it becomes this endless loop.
And another really hard pill to swallow is that the coronavirus is it's basically introducing and proving its point that we are completely dependent on globalization for our survival. All 8 billion of us, there couldn't be 8 billion of us without globalization. So as soon as globalization slows down, that threatens survival. And that's what I foresee coronavirus. I foresee an economic response. So, a decrease in globalization, that's going to make Wall Street plummet. That's going to make small businesses on Main Street close. That means more unemployment, more people dependent on the government, which means the government is going to be having to spend more on just like basic human needs and less on, let's build infrastructure. Let's invest in NASA and figure out more science from the universe, learn more about the universe to help us thrive. Right now we're like at this we're heading from when we were thriving to surviving. We were thriving though because we were over exploiting the earth for that small amount of time, just 400 years. On that scale of 100,000 years or a million years, that's like nothing. So there's going to be a strong reaction from coronavirus, economics, and then ultimately climate change. Climate change is going to be this huge response by Earth to show us that she's the boss. She requires balance. She needs species that live in balance with her. And human beings need to either jump on board with that balance, or we're gonna perish as bodies. Our bodies are gonna perish.
I think about that. When is the Earth going to let out her, her memo? Like, when is she going to, tell us, look, guys, I've given you a long chance here, and you're going in a dangerous direction. Because when you talk about thriving, I mean, industrialization has given us a view or a perspective of thriving and what thriving is. And we certainly have thrived in the industrial age and through oil and coal and this globalization, but it's very one-sided, and it's obviously very detrimental in the end because it keeps everyone dependent and unsustainable in the long term. When you talk about this economic situation now due to the COVID, I mean, first of all, globalization, it might affect us, and we might say, hey, I'm going to start growing my own food. Isn't this great? But what about all the more third world countries out there that depend on us for this economy, for this globalism? Because we might sit here in our privilege and just say, well, yeah, I can make my own sweater, whatever. But now that the system's been set up this way, it's like then you almost blacklist all these other people in other countries that depend on that sweatshop job. So the whole thing, the whole model is unsustainable. Everything, it seems to be unsustainable.
And that has everything to do with like how we are brought up, in which society we are born. What sort of values are you taught as you grow up? What are the values that you learn in public school? Or if you went to private school, what did you learn? What were the values you learned in college? What were the values that you learned at home? Eventually that becomes what you are, what you believe, and that's how you live life. So you are taught in a belief system, and then those are the decisions that you make for the future. So school, the teachers, they were born a while ago, they're 40 years old. They went to school 30 years ago, and they were taught things that were, 30 years ago, those ideas. Now this gets perpetuated. So actually what you're learning in school is like a 100-year lag in what we actually need in society. The way that school is being taught right now is as if students are going to be going to college and eventually getting that 9-to-5 job, which eventually when you turn 65, you get that retirement benefits package. But when you look at the science, where are we going? If you look at the science, climate change is a huge issue. We have no idea what our future looks like. So why are we learning skills, assuming that like this lifestyle of over consuming, buying a big house, buying a fast car, that's going to be the way life is in 60 years, assuming that. Now, if we have teachers that have big minds, big hearts, they're going to be giving the tools for the students to adapt to their future, not knowing what that future is, but giving the tools to survive. And at this point, meditation, mindfulness, spirituality, philosophy, these are going to be the core tools. Psychology, self-help, these are going to be the main tools for us to be able to manage the karma that we've created. Basically the reaction of Earth showing us that she is our God, and she has more power than us. She is more beautiful, more intelligent than us, and we are her children.
But people have to believe that. I mean, they have to feel this within them. And you talk about, I agree, and when you say that it's based on how you're raised, it's all the influences around you from your formidable, impressionable years. Is that person going to be greedy? Is that person going to be more immoral or unethical in their practice? But do you think that even if someone who is educated to be greedy, let's say, or just influenced to be really greedy and successful, do you think that their heart can step in and override that programming?
Really good question. Basically, it seems like, if you live for 25 years, it's going to take 25 years to deprogram your whole ego through meditation, through yoga, through plant medicines, whatever it is. It's because we literally built our programming in our brains, in our central nervous system, in our body, in our guts, our hearts. So there are strategies out there for us to start that process of deprogramming the stuff that this unsustainable society taught us.
But I think you're right. I think you're right when you talk about the heart. The heart is so powerful. It is the center of the universe. it has the power to override the program. And I think it just takes people's awareness to its potential. And people obviously don't highlight heart intelligence, as we spoke about earlier in the video. Heart intelligence, it's just not in your curriculum. And yet that is the central everything. That is the nucleus. That is the black hole at the center of our galaxy. And it has the power to somehow override all of these patterns, perpetual generational patterns of greed and surviving and lack and the illusion of lack and the illusion of lack of love, all these things. But it's being kept from us. It's being kept from us. And it's wild because it's in all of our bodies. It's here. We all have one. And it's like we're being kept to distract ourselves constantly with the outside world. Don't you think someone else knows this? I mean, someone knows this out there. A lot of people must know this. Intelligent people know this. And yet it perpetuates. So to me, it feels like there's a force here. There's a force that's not even a part of the human family, because I feel like humans generally are good. I don't feel like humans are genuinely, or potentially really bad people. I think they might become bad because of their childhood. But I overall think human beings are very, very good. And it makes me think that because they're good, they can be manipulated, unfortunately. And as we see in our society, they clearly are. They're clearly hyper manipulated to believe in all of these illusions and lackings and disempowerments and being not being attractive. It's all these like menial thoughts. You're someone, Carl, who has great thoughts. You have great thoughts, and you should feel great, because so many people don't even give themselves that credit. Everyone can have great thoughts and great feelings and great emotions, but it's almost like there's fear holding people back from themselves. They're afraid of their thoughts. They're afraid of their feelings. And that's another program that seems to be swept over humanity, where we're made to feel afraid of ourselves. And when you become afraid of yourself, how can you ever transcend lack and limitation? You have to embrace yourself. You have to embrace your heart. You have to be fearless about your heart and what it wants. I know you and I both have, we both have pretty strong hearts, and we're aware enough that we want to tune in to that vibration of our heart. And when we do, we realize how incredible it is. Like, it's just this infinite field of potential that is within us at all times, and I don't have to pay a penny for it. It's free. It's like free infinite energy. And it blows my mind that when I finally open my eyes and look around this world and what humans have done, that they've done what they've done, that they've created this illusion that we're actually the opposite. We're not infinite free energy. We're just completely going to be stuck on this wheel of, whatever you want to call it, lack, karma, and believe in it and then perpetuate it. So I keep pushing it with you here, because I just want to keep pushing through, like, what is it going to take for humanity to transcend that? My advice, I remember the last time we spoke, my advice was to stop watching media and stop watching all these distractions. Because when you think about the narratives that we're all ingesting every single day, whether it's COVID, politics, or just anything on Netflix, whether it's a documentary, or there's such a barrage of information, And it's made to be very, very stimulating and very, very entertaining, that why would you ever want to sit down and just tune in to your heart? Why would you want to? And again, it seems very intelligently designed to keep us away from ourselves. What is that about? Did I just
That's a
drop the
lot.
hammer? I
No,
just
that's a
dropped the
lot.
hammer.
That was amazing. That was amazing. It's a lot to chew on. I'm just trying to figure out where I can go with that. That's a lot.
Yeah, I mean, we have it all. We have it all. Each of us has it all inside of us. And I mean, myself, I've been a recluse for, some years, just because, when I was a teenager, I had depression, and I know you've mentioned when you were a teenager, you had depression. And I had the same perspective I do now. I just didn't understand why everyone was buying into this illusion. I knew I had a heart then. I knew I was this powerful being. I didn't remember at that time who I was, but I felt it. And I've always felt it because it's always with me, always. And it is right now. And I don't understand why you might have perceived that earlier when we were teenagers, and why others do not. I just don't understand that. Because to me, and maybe to you, we were looking around thinking, doesn't everyone see what I see? Isn't everyone understanding me when I speak what I speak? But I realized no. I realized very quickly, no, they didn't. And that always perplexed me, and it made me feel very depressed, because I was actually the minority in my opinions. I wasn't a part of the, as they call mainstream. But the mainstream was the perpetuator of the illusion. It just perpetuated all this illusion that I'm speaking about, that keeps us from ourselves, our true infinite selves.
Yeah, one of the things I was going to say is that no matter how strange this seems, our imperfections, our karma, our over-consuming, all of these things that are bad are ultimately part of the big plan of the ultimate intelligence, infinite intelligence, which, I think that's synonymous with God. So no matter what we perceive as bad, I mean, we can call it things bad if we want. Ultimately, what that is God showing us signs to be ourselves and to have the fearlessness. One of the things I was going to add to this is having the courage to find our inner greatness. I never thought I was going to say that. I've always thought like greatness, like that's for people who want to be famous.
Yeah. It's good to be great, I guess. I mean, what's great though? Someone who's greedy might think their billion-dollar empire is great. So
it's the taking back of that word from materialists and returning it back to that greatness, that dream that you have. And that could involve being rich, but that's not the goal. Like maybe being rich is a side effect of you actually achieving your greatness, which is discovering your heart and discovering exactly who you are, and you know it. It's not an idea, it's just like, oh, of course, this is who I have always been. So depression is pointing us back to that. the depression is the purpose of that is to say, look at all of this deadness and boredom in the world. People are trying to go out there and achieve and find their happiness through things. And that's huge in our society. So
Yeah.
when you have this realization, boom, that it's not about that, the first step is depression. Because it's like, wow, like this whole running in what are the rat's wheels? What are those called? Hamster wheels?
Hamster wheels.
Hamster wheels. Or in the myth of Sisyphus. Have you heard of the myth of Sisyphus?
No.
So
What's
this is a mythology in ancient Greece, where so Sisyphus had to carry this gigantic rock up a mountain, and as soon as he got to the top, the rock would fall back down again. You know, so you kind of imagine his face. I just carried this rock all the way up the mountain, and it fell back down. And what I have to do is go back down the mountain and pull it back up. So it's just, you're bringing the rock up the mountain, it falls down. You go back down, you bring the rock back up the mountain, it falls down. So that is a great story for what we're doing here in life. And so some people try to find goals, bring that rock up the mountain, and what they think is, at the mountain, I'm gonna have it. Whatever their it is. It could be money, a private jet, fame, a beautiful spouse, things that they don't have now that they want in the future. But when you have more life experience and you're a little bit more humble or a little bit more honest with your heart, you know that the it, or the when I have it in the future, that comes, but then it goes. Sometimes you don't even reach it. Also, normally 99% of the time we don't reach it. So it's like, why did I have that dream of materialism? And even if we do reach it, we have it for a while, and then that magic of it, of having it, leaves. That magic of having your first sports car, it's great for a while. But then what happens? You start to plan and imagine, what's the next thing? What's that next mountain that I can climb?
That reminds me of the conversation I was having with my mother recently, where we were discussing dopamines in our society and the addiction of dopamine in our brain, and how, and this plays in with what you're discussing here. With all this social media, for example, you know, you've got likes, you've got comments, you've got followers. All of these things are exciting you in a trivial way when you get that stuff. And they call it notifications. And all it does is it gives you a hit of dopamine. And you're just like, oh, wow, I just got a follower, or I just got this. And, you know, and then eventually it wears off, like you said with the car. I mean, it wears off. But it's almost like we're being trained now to not even want the car, not even want that, you know, greed or $1 million business. We just want like 10,000 more followers. And it's almost like all this dopamine is being entrained into these devices, and all that motivation is and my mom totally agreed with this. It's formulating Americans. I don't know how it is in the rest of the world, but it's forming American. I mean, I know technology is everywhere, but it makes your psychology more the psychology of an addict, because you want more and you want more and you want more. Just like he wants wants to take that rock up on the mountain, because I guess he wants to achieve something, and he's not going to stop until he does. But every time he's going up there, he's probably getting some dopamine. Or if there's, you know, if there's a car up there or a nice hot dinner meal up there for himself, he's going to get driven by that. But all of this dopamine addiction, and to me, when I discussed this, I was like, wow, this is 100% effective to me, because I'm not so involved with social media, but I still understand with all the content around us, how easy it is for us to just constantly want that next fix of content, of documentary, of book, of spiritual guru, and it just goes on and on and on and on. And then at the end of the day, what do you have? Like, what happened? You know, it's almost like we're so perpetuated by content, great content that just keeps getting greater and greater. And now they're talking about holograms and interactive virtual reality and all this stuff, meaning they're going to perpetuate this illusion to get even more realistic and more satisfying and more dopamine craving and give you more dopamine triggers. So that's pretty scary, because to me I see the trajectory of just people becoming so obsessed with the material world because they're going to make it so. You know, they keep and when I say they, I'm kind of hinting at who are they. They keep waving this shiny object in front of humanity. Just look at the next shiny object. Look at this. Now look over here. Now look over here. Do you ever feel like we're just being constantly distracted? Do you ever feel that?
Yeah, and something that's also tough to swallow is there's something called the spiritual superego. So my teacher Craig Holliday talks about that. It's not that you go from, you know, your normal ego mind, and then all of a sudden you have your awakening, and that forever you are disconnected from your ego forever, and there will be no more suffering. That's a myth. What tends to happen on our spiritual path is that, you know, in the most of our lives is living in the ego, and then we start watching things on YouTube about non-duality, oneness, enlightenment, and we start forming our spiritual superego, where now we're, instead of searching for cars and women and things like this, fame, now we're seeking enlightenment. And what we think at that time is that enlightenment is an idea. So we see enlightenment as something that we're going to have in the future, which that's what we're doing with cars too. I'm going to have that in the future, and it's going to be a great experience. Enlightenment, that's going to happen to me in the future, and it's going to be a great experience. And also, so that's how we start forming it. And then eventually we have our first awakening. But that ends. The experience begins and ends. And you're like, dang, like I thought like I found it. And I thought like that's what I became. I thought like you find enlightenment, you become it, and that you have no more problems.
Yeah. So what do you think it is? Because it just dawned on me that you think you have it. It gives you that momentary satisfaction. Okay, you have reached a new level of spirituality from your guru or whatnot, or you're on a really high, things are really feeling good, whatever, and then it dissipates. Wouldn't that be because all of this stuff is occurring outside of oneself? You're reaching out for that car, you're reaching out for that guru. It's all externalizing, and that's part of the illusion. If we're talking about heart intelligence, heart infinity, there is nothing more. It's free, it's abundant, and it's not going anywhere. So when you constantly project the reality that one needs desires that are outside of oneself, they will pursue those desires, would they not? They're convinced that they need that car, that they need that guru to take it to the next level. When in reality, what always happens is They get their dopamine fix, they run a temporary high from achieving their goal, and then it dissipates. And then they're back down to square one, or they just go down a rung on the ladder and they think, huh, why am I not so excited about it anymore? Why am I not so jazzed about it anymore? It's because of how they've designed this whole system. And they know it. I mean, when I think about this stuff, and maybe let me ask you, do you think this is all so intelligently designed to keep us away from ourselves? What is that about? You know, that's very interesting. Like, what are the implications of that? That this system is so advanced to keep us constantly distracted and wanting things outside of ourselves to achieve success or our own perception of success over and over, year after year. And we keep raising the bar, we keep raising the game because we believe we have to. I mean, it's brilliant. It's honestly brilliant, but it's brilliantly limiting. It's brilliantly like manipulative. I mean, it's a brilliant system for how efficiently they've gotten everyone hooked on the external world. They've gotten us hooked on the external world. And now we've got the whole world in our pocket. They've given us that. You know, and I'm no different. I think this is amazing, you know, and I can sit here and I can watch a video and go out into deep space, and then I can go to Australia or something. You know, it's endless. It's endless. But now that I see what it really is, it's this black hole of dissatisfaction in the long run because it's outside of oneself. It's outside of oneself. And it's made to be really appealing. It's made to be really beautiful. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder. They've made these things beautiful for a reason. They've made them attractive to human beings. Everyone's attracted to them. They want them. They want access to them. I find it all very interesting, and I find the implications quite overwhelming. What do you think?
Yeah, and that's a really, really good point. I think ultimately, this might sound strange, but one of the most humbling things that we can realize is ultimately, it's really common in spirituality to call the outside world an illusion or a dream or something that's not real. So that's the first stage of awakening. A lot of people think that's the final stage. It's actually the first stage of awakening. To begin to see that the outside world, what I was always attached to, I was always seeking pleasure out of it, to all of a sudden realize or believe that it's a dream. It's actually really easy to believe it. It's difficult to see, but that is the first stage, because we're so enthralled by the outside world that the first thing that we need to realize is that it, on one level, yes, it's an illusion, or it's more like a dream, or I like to call it magic. The spiritual word is Maya. People call it illusion, but it's really more like magic. So the first step is to see that the outside world is not physical, which science teaches us that it is, mostly. But when you go to really, really cutting edge or bleeding edge science and quantum mechanics and neuroscience and things like this, you know, they're seeing, or they're claiming that the world isn't physical either. That when you go down to, you know, the most minute, the smallest things in the universe, that the laws of that is based off of basically magic that we don't understand. Like things can exist and not exist simultaneously. two things can be communicating on opposite sides of the universe, and
Yeah.
also just the fact of how tiny these things are.
Yeah.
That's basically scientifically proving that the outside world is not ultimately physical. So
Right.
that's kind of the first stage. So, and that's humbling, actually. It's very, very humbling. And then what happens next? You get the realization that you are the outside world. So it seems like, wow, like that's very egotistical. Just saying.
I don't get that. No, I don't think it's egotistical.
Yeah, it's definitely, it's not ultimately. When you really see it, that like, I am what is inside of what I'm aware of, which is everything I can be aware of. When you see that you are it, like literally you are the squirrel, you are the rock, it's so humbling, because why would you treat yourself poorly? And why would you seek yourself? Because you are yourself. Why are you seeking yourself? So like in spirituality, it's exponential. So your first awakening is huge, but then the next awakening is like 100 million times bigger than your first awakening. So it's like a hockey stick graph too. But ultimately, like, I'm not saying like I've reached the top, or ultimately I don't believe there is a top, right? There is not ultimately a top, but like going through these stages, or like, and you see that next stage, and you believe that like that's it. I've found the truth of the universe. But then that event ends, that spiritual experience ends, and then it's the humbling part of like you return to daily life. Okay, but you are forever changed, but in very, very subtle ways, very, very subtle ways. And you might not even notice how you've changed, but it's usually in humbling ways. So like having this experience, like I am everything I experience, is gigantic. But then you go back into your normal everyday life, but that realization can now be embodied, which is the purpose of spiritual realizations, is bringing that here in our lives, because we can share it with each other.
Yeah.
So my awakening is not just my awakening. So like, for example, my depression, I thought it was my depression, like just mine. So spirituality is no different. Like, we tend to believe that like my spiritual path is just my spiritual path. It's disconnected from everything.
Yeah.
But when we begin to bring it into our lives, we can see that like it is the spiritual awakening, and that we're a part of it together, all of us.
Yeah, and you touched on something in your previous video about you were talking about the depression, and you just said, it's not my depression. You realize at some point it's not my depression. And in your previous video, you discussed the depth of depression, or the depth of sadness in the universe, and how deep does that really go. And I think that that's partially what I was feeling when I was a teenager, and partially maybe what you were feeling as a teenager, because there is this sadness in the universe, and I don't know. We feel it. Obviously, we feel it. We think it's external, maybe from Earth or from our immediate environment, but is it? I mean, that's really kind of far out. But I mean, I can jump to the next one if that's just too abstract. Because I felt it too. Like I felt that depth where I'm just like, wow, this has nothing to do with me anymore. This isn't about my little life as Josh. Like, it's nothing about me. It's like I'm feeling, my heart is feeling into this deep generational compassion of my ancestors and everything that they've been through. And it's in my DNA, it's in my blood, it's in my heart. Otherwise, what is the point of this intelligent design for us to perpetuate generation after generation? Where's the storage? Where is the data being stored? If we're ever going to have a breakthrough in, say, eons of time or records, where is it stored? Well, it's stored in the DNA. It's stored in the heart. And maybe in the spirit, the soul, which we haven't discussed, the soul and the role of the soul and where the soul comes from, and how the soul might just be the consciousness, period. The soul of Kyle is just a fractal of this source field, and your soul is connected to God, will forever be connected to God because you are God. It's not about externalizing anymore. It's about internalizing that you are God and not being egotistical about it, not thinking you're a God and so therefore you can have power over others. That's someone's choice, but that's obviously not, that's not my choice. I mean, that might be some people's choice, but to know that you are God, and your soul, where does that come from? And why is our soul, do you think our soul is infinite? Do you think our soul had a beginning somewhere and is just reincarnating? I know you're Buddhist, right?
Yes and no.
Yes and no. Okay, great answer. I love a lot about Buddhism. So Buddhism has the reincarnation concept, and the whole idea of perpetuating reincarnation, the hamster wheel. What good is that if there's no data? What good is it if your soul is erased, so to speak, or at least the data is erased and you have to repeat so you make better choices, so you don't make mistakes, yada yada, however they word it. They always kind of word it like that, where you have to repeat it. You have to repeat it and not make those mistakes again. But if there's no data for you to reference your past, why? Why is that data missing from us, from our soul? And who took that data? Why isn't it here? We all are infinite. We've all been here before. I feel I feel very old as I cough. And I always have. When I was a kid, I felt so old. And I did feel different from other kids, but I think it was just, I know that's cliche to say, but it's just, I think it was partially my depression then, because first of all, I didn't avoid my depression. I don't know how you handled your depression, but I didn't avoid it. I kind of dove into it and I was like, what is this? Why do I feel this way all the time? Like, what does this actually mean? Why is my emotional body different from the kids around me? And it always perplexed me. What about you? How did you handle it? Because for me, I had it for years as a teenager. I had it for a long time. But it brought me in to what you were saying. Like, it brought me in to myself. It took the external away. So in a way, the depression was a gift because it removed the external world from me. The depression made me retreat into myself. And it was there that I discovered myself. Again, I've always been here, yet it took the depression as a catalyst for me to finally realize more of who I am. I won't say I know who I am yet, but we're remembering tidbits as we get older. We remember smaller and smaller, well, larger and larger, but we remember tidbits more and more and more over time. So it's almost like you and I were jump-started at an earlier age to go within and find our God spark and feel it. And then we felt it, and we felt its power, and we thought, oh my God, whoa, how is the world not a utopian now? How is it not like just the most beautiful and coherent and symbiotic organism? Like, how is that possible? Because we're feeling it, us, you and me, just two kids. We're feeling that. And if we felt it, then so many other people have felt this. So how, again, it's almost like it's being capped. It almost feels like it's being capped. That power, that genie is forced back into the bottle, and it's being capped, and you're told to not even look at that bottle because it's just a dream. We discussed dreams earlier, and the disempowerment of one's own imagination. Discrediting people's dreams, discrediting people's imagination, I think is such it's like a crime, because that is your infinite field. Your heart is your imagination. It's your image nation. And to take that power away from someone, to say, don't focus on that, focus on the external world, because that's real and it's been validated by science. See? And then they show you a graph, infographic. And I love science, I appreciate science, but at the same time, I know it's one-sided. I know it's a closed system, because it's never going to pursue spirituality. So therefore, it's a closed system. And yes, science benefits us immensely, but scientists know this too. I've seen so many scientists come out of the woodwork, go against their colleagues, and say, you know what, it's not what we all think it is. And you discuss quantum physics and all this other more advanced science than our earth science that tells us nothing is actually physical. So we know that. They talk about the simulation now. So that means, and you said yourself, we are the external, because it's not physical. It's not on one level, it's not physical. So we are that external world. And if we are what's external, then we can create all of it. We are the creators. We are God. So I think there's some sort of influence here that is capping humanity for some reason that I don't understand yet, other than control. Control is the obvious, because we realize this, you and I, Kyle, and so many other people in the world realize this. And so many of us out there are such good people who only want to do good and to perpetuate creativity and abundance and love. What is this influence? When I think about time, I meditate on time. I don't know, do you meditate on time? When I meditate on time, it's so profound. to go into that deep, deep, deep past that we don't know anything about, but to just go there through your own intention, through your heart, to go to that place in time. Meditating on time, just like, I feel like I'm traveling through time when I meditate on it. If things become so still, and I realize that the beginning of all of this is happening now. It's still happening. And that, we're told, people talk about the power of now, the power of now, the power of now. That's a big guru talk. And I think that's important, yet it also disqualifies the past and the future when you're constantly focusing on the now. But the past and the future are in the now as well. So that means it's all part of the whole. It's not about just putting blinders on and saying, I'm in the now. Can't you see? Like the past is now, the future is now, the now is now. It's just amazing. It's just amazing, like, how long have we really been here, Kyle? How long have we really, really been here? And have we been here on Earth? Is it just Earth that we've been here before? Or are we on other Earths? How is this replicated? All of our economy is going towards replication, automation, making things more efficient. So why wouldn't that apply to a larger system like a human species or a planet? It's going to be applied that way based on a much larger intelligence, a much larger awareness. So, did we design all this? Did we design all this?
So yes. Yes, the answer is the nature of mind. So we all have the mind, the one mind is what connects us. But then we also have all of our individual minds, which in aggregate is the one mind. So we imagine our reality. Reality is not physical. It's not even not physical. It's imagination, creative imagination.
Mm-hmm.
So the reason why, for example, why society is the way that it is because we imagine it to be like this in aggregate. And your life is the way that it is because we all imagine it to be that way too. So you imagined it, society imagined it. Imagine the past, your past, imagine your future, imagine right now. But ultimately, there is a huge project of this imagination. To reunite and then to separate into particulars in order to create beauty in the way of evolution, change, art. This would be more Shakti or feminist, or not feminist. Feminine energy of like change and movement and creation. But there's also this more masculine perfection as well that is just pure reality, pure now, pure consciousness that it really it can't move because it's always just been. It's just always has been. It's already existing. So even as far back as you can go, before the Big Bang, Like, we already existed before time existed. So
I agree.
yeah, yeah. So I mean, ultimately, that's why I like to answer questions on multiple levels. So ultimately, like, you as an individual create your life, even though it doesn't seem like it all the time. It's because we have the ideas in our heads is become reality. So when we have limiting ideas, we have limiting thoughts and saying, I can't be that great. We're creating the not greatness in our life. But when we have this realization, like, oh, I have the complete fearlessness, I have the complete freedom to be great, and you believe it in your heart, right? You have to believe in your heart. You can't just be an idea. If it's just an idea and it's not supported by the heart, it doesn't become reality because you actually don't believe it, because your heart doesn't believe it. So combining that idea of your dharma, your path, with your heart, the courage, it has to become reality. It has to happen.
Yeah. Yeah, it really is belief, because imagination is one component, very important component, but you're right. It's all about belief. And I think about that a lot. You have to believe that you can have a life that you want. You can't, they talk about imposter syndrome. You know, I worked in computers, and there's a lot of people there that they say they have imposter syndrome. It's normal. You know, you get a job in computers and you just fake it till you make it, basically, because there's just so many components with software and engineering and all that stuff. But what that example is just belief. You have to believe that you belong there. You have to believe that you belong at your job, that you are not an imposter. But it's almost like the imposter syndrome is it's a bridge to believe. You know, they say fake it till you make it. Why do they say that? Why do they say fake it till you make it? Because you're forcing yourself to believe it before it actually happens. So fake it is almost synonymous with believe it. You know, fake it sounds phony. Obviously, it uses the word fake, but it's not. It's actually synonymous more with believe it until you make it. Not fake it until you make it. Believe it until you make it. And it is all belief. And imagination, I have the life that I have because partially I believe it. I believe it exists based on my parents, based on probably a lot of projections from my teachers, my peers, all through my school years, and telling me where I'm going to be or where I'm going to end up or whatnot, you know, and I have kind of shed all that. And I think everyone has to, when they awaken to some degree, you have to drop all of these projections from the past. Not drop them, that's not a good way of putting it. It's, you have to embrace your past. You have to embrace everything that's happened in order to transcend it, in order to let that go and move forward. I don't believe in abandoning things. I'm someone who doesn't like to abandon, you know, my relationships. If there's an ending in a relationship, I like closure. There needs to be closure. Otherwise, you leave something open, it's going to be detrimental over time. You know, it's like an open wound. You might as well put the antiseptic on the wound. You might as well put the Band-Aid on the wound and speed up the healing process. And that's called closure. And everyone needs closure with so many things in their life that have been left open-ended. You know, and so both people are almost, it's like, to me, I feel, man, in this society that people are like traumatized over and over from, you know, either not scoring that goal on the sports team and ruining the game, or failing a test and getting, yelled at by your parents, or having your crush reject you, someone you love, and then be rejected. And then people carry all of these traumas in their life. And all those traumas are like beliefs of trauma, beliefs that these things happen to oneself. But again, it's perception. So you either believe they're a trauma, or you can believe differently and believe they're a tool that you can use in the now to learn from, for one, and let go, and know that you are not those traumas. You are not, whoever rejected you, or whatever job you got fired from, or whatever happens to people. Things happen to people all the time in this world. Life is not simple like it was 100 years ago, where you worked the same job your whole life. Things are very complex now. It's just like, it's very different in just 100 years. So people seem to have many more traumas happening in one lifetime that they have to then transcend, and believe they can transcend them. But it takes belief. And I can't stress that enough. And I'm glad you brought that up, because it's not just imagination. Imagination is the idea. Every skyscraper in New York City started from the imagination. Everything in creation starts in the imagination. It is God. God is our imagination. And you couple that with your heart. Your heart is like the navigation on, it's the navigation on the stern. It's how you're guiding your ship. And I think I told you about the time I lived alone and on a peninsula in Maine. And did I tell you that story, and how my intuition just came out of the ashes tenfold? Well, it's a quick story, but all it was is I just eliminated the distractions, because at that point in my life, I didn't believe that I was good enough. I was losing faith because of all these interactions, all these things that you perceive as not good. I wasn't a good student. I think I told you that. I was a really not a good student. And I believed that I wasn't a good student, but I didn't necessarily believe that I was a waste of space. I didn't believe that I was, useless, kind of like how they made me feel, like, well, you're not going to go far because you're not very smart. And my mother, she believed in that. My mother's dyslexic, and dyslexia is not a big deal, but back when she grew up, I guess they made it more of a big deal. And she had to deal with being called stupid from her dyslexia many times. And I hear her, and I hear her voice, and I hear the trauma in it about how she believed she was stupid. She wasn't smart. And it's so subtle, man. It's like so subtle. It's like one person. It's like one teacher. It could be one teacher that rejects a student or fails a student, and the impact of that on that child's growth can be just so vast over time. My mom was talking about this stuff like it happened yesterday, when her teachers would scold her for being dyslexic. It was like it happened yesterday. And you come across that pattern where people who describe traumas, it's like it's still happening in their head. It's like it's perpetual. It's still happening, because they have to believe in something different. They have to stop believing in that trauma as being detrimental to their growth. They have to believe that they are not any of those traumas. They are whole. They were born whole and you die whole. And everything in between seems to get muddied and seems to get really gray. And adults seem to become bitter almost and lose faith with their own spirituality and their own connection because of this and that. Yet, we all know that none of that's true. These are lessons learned in our life. It's a matter of just how one perceives their lessons. You know, someone can, well, I skipped over the story, but the story I was going to say is when I was up, I moved out into this cabin in the woods on a peninsula way out in Maine, and I lived there alone, and I unplugged. I didn't have any technology, no phone even, nothing. So if my car broke down, I had to contact my neighbor or whoever car passed me by, which happened. And it was interesting because the first time my car, it didn't break down, but I not drove off the road, but I drove into a ditch, and I couldn't get back out of the ditch. And the first car that drove by stopped and had a chain in the back of the pickup and pulled me out of the ditch, first car. And when the car drove away, the license plate on the truck, I kid you not, said Angel. And the person was completely unsuspecting to me. You know, I looked at this person, they just came across as like a normal person in my local area. Your face. But yeah, that happened. That was amazing. And here I was with no phone, no technology. But what I was going to say about doing that is when I lived without that technology and I lived in a very remote place, I started to hear my own intuition. I started to hear my own imagination and my heart. And all of this distraction, not only does it distract us, but it drowns out our natural vibrations. This is a different vibration. We talk about how we're all space. We're not actually physical, we're just space. And science says that. A part of science says we literally our bodies are made up of mostly space. So everything is sound. Everything is based on a wave pattern and sound and vibration. And all of these distractions, all of these external desires and needs, or so-called perceived needs, you think you need it, they attract a different vibration. You're putting out a bait for a different vibration when you have, again, it all goes back to this. It all goes back to your own infinite vibration, which we always have. Do you think, Kyle, that it's just because people don't trust their own vibration?
Yeah, it's a sad thing to realize, but naturally humans, we believe that we're not enough. We're taught that we're not enough, and then we believe it, and so like it's a mutual. We live in a mutual society where we're constantly seeking for something because we believe that, you know, in our core we're not enough. You know, but I think we're misidentifying what a core is. You know, in our society, it tends to be like our core is more like our status or our agenda for like what we want done in our futures. Basically, like your image in society, like who are you in our society? Like when people think of you, what do they think of? We tend to think of it as like, you know, well, I'm not a PhD, I'm not an MD, I don't have some title, okay? But even those people, they're also like, what's the next thing that I don't have? So
Hmm.
everyone seems to be seeking something that they don't have, or misidentifying our core, which is ultimately the same core as everybody else.
Yeah, absolutely. But they think they're separate. They think their core is something they have to embellish constantly, embellish, whether it's with new titles, new trophies. Um, and man, all this success or so-called success, apparently it gets erased upon death. So one achieves all of this greatness and then they pass away and it's forgotten. Although I don't believe that it's forgotten. I believe that the data is out there. The truth is out there. To be cliche, but I do believe the data is out there. And I think in terms of reincarnation, we come back here and that brilliant inventor gets reborn and he becomes another brilliant inventor because he has an imprint. I think the word imprint is very interesting because it tunes into a subtle energy. When you talk about imprints and impressions, that data from death that seems to be erased, there must be an imprint that's left because the spark always remains of consciousness. And when that consciousness recycles and goes into another vessel, there is an impression, there's an imprint, there's a residue that's left because it has to be that way. It's infinite, it's an infinite spark. And then that person might grow up and become an inventor in their life again, and maybe even come up with the same inventions again. And yet we seem to be on a planet where people, where will that take us over time? When that spark, when that imprint is just that, it's just an imprint. Does that mean we will forever remain an imprint of consciousness? And when Kyle reincarnates, he will have that imprint of the past that is still connected to him, but he has now forgotten his past as Kyle. To me, what I'm feeling inside myself, it's hard to articulate, but we need more space. We need more space to expand. Because right now we're working in a terrarium that is given the illusion of limits, and therefore we believe those limits, and therefore we perpetuate those limits over generations. And yet we know that we are the external world and we create it all. And we're given power or free will over our own individual lives, but we're not given power or free will over everyone else's lives, unless you have a lot of money. And then you're given power or given the option to have power over others. And that's where greed comes in and all this stuff. But to me, all that stuff is artificial. It's not normal human behavior. It's all byproducts of this false system that perpetuates lack and lack of freedom, lack of love. So this system, which is closed in my feeling, and I feel this, this system needs to end. So then you know, we ask ourselves, when is this going to end? When does this cycle actually, when does this rubber band stretch so far that it finally snaps and starts to recede back to its original point? If everything is cyclical in nature, and we know that it is, we know that time is cyclical, there's going to come a point where we are liberated as a human family. There's going to come a point in time, man, where we are liberated and we will remember our freedom again, just like we once did, maybe 1,000,000 years ago. Who knows how long this cycle has been, this last cycle. But that time will come because it's in the everlasting now moment. And so one thing I've learned in my spiritual journey is to remember that point in time when we do remember, because it's already happened. And it will happen again. And because it's happening in the future, it's happening now. So use your heart to pull that impression, that imprint from the ethers, or however you want to conceptualize it, because everyone can meditate in their own capacity using their imagination. That's why it's there. But harness that point in time where humanity breaks through, because honestly, man, that's all I think that's the only thing that's going to save us. The whole idea of going to Mars right now and terraforming Mars and sending people to Mars to restart this whole Earth to restart this whole human society again on another planet is a terrible idea, in my opinion. It's a terrible idea. Because we would just perpetuate the same hierarchies. We have to really wake up. You know, The Matrix was, you've seen The Matrix, right? Did you like that movie?
Yeah, I saw it when I was young, and then saw it again recently.
Yeah, I saw it again pretty recently, maybe a year ago, and it still felt so relevant in its concepts that we are infinite energy. Therefore, we have a market value, so to speak, because we are infinite energy. How valuable is that as an asset? I'm thinking in terms of economies and trade, but human beings have infinite energy. And the Matrix was all about a different intelligence using that infinite energy to sustain themselves. Now, we as humans, we eat animals and plants to sustain ourselves. Insects eat other insects. Animals eat bugs. It's this perpetual cycle. So who and what is utilizing human beings? We're taught that we're at the top of the food chain. We're taught that we're at the top to believe that it's a closed system. But all that closed system is doing is closing our mind off from thinking of what else could be beyond us. What else is out there? What else is on the planet with us? And I just see human beings as so powerful that there is no chance in hell, especially with the society we live in, that we haven't been tapped for that energy. In the Matrix, you know, human beings in that movie are used as batteries and then put in a simulated virtual reality. And yet now they're perpetuating that in advertisements. Dude, I see advertisements now where they're like talking about simulated worlds and creating new, it just gets more and more matrixy. It's just like, dude, we've already seen the Matrix. Like, why are they actually creating this now? More so. So human beings need to wake up to that fact, because thinking you're at the top of the food chain might be a nice thought for the time, but it's going to close off your thoughts. Just like thinking that the universe is empty, we're taught, or I was taught, that the universe is empty, that life is only on Earth. But guess what that does? That shuts your brain down from thinking about what is possible. And I think to myself, isn't that very efficient? To tell an infinite being like a child that there is nothing out there in space. Some people will say, well, we don't know. We don't know. But to me, with 50, 100 million species alone on this one planet of plants, animals, insects, human beings are one species of like 50 to 100 million species on this planet at once. To me, it's quite obvious that the universe would be full of life, full of it. But when I think about that, my mind just opens and only opens more and more and more. And so I realize that they tell us all this stuff to close us down, to shut us down, to shut down our imagination of what is and what is not possible. But we're infinite beings. How can they even say that? So have you felt these things, Kyle, in your life, in your adolescence too? Because I felt this stuff when I was a teenager, and it made me very depressed and lost feeling as to why I'm feeling this. But like I said to you, we we felt that early, and that is to our benefit, man. That is our strength, because we've been through that dark night of the soul when we were kids. That's nothing a child should go through, man. That's terrible. I would never wish that upon a child. But we went through that, and it's changed us completely. It's changed us completely. And my mind is very open, and it's always been open, because that's all I know to be true. We are infinite energy. I mean, that's all there is to it. How can you close infinite energy? You have to give them the illusion of limitation. You have to get them to believe in limitation. And therefore it is, because they know the power of our beliefs. Whoever they are, I don't know. But it's obviously handed down in a hierarchical fashion, all the way down to parents and parenting. Yeah, that was a lot.
That was good. I was just absorbing.
I mean, what do you think about all that? I mean, it's just, I feel it every single day, man, every day. And I go out there in society and I just see people who believe that there are so many limits out there. They believe that they have so many limitations. And you're right, it's all a belief system. It's all a belief system. And the Matrix came out like over 20 years ago. So we've all seen that movie, and it was definitely an inception point for for humanity, for the collective consciousness to see that and expand upon what is out there. Another way, think about this, another way to utilize a infinite energy being that is a very valuable asset is to crap, I just lost it. I'm downloading here, man.
That's so great. That's great.
Yeah, I am. But yeah, so another way, yeah, because it gives us, so another way to bottle us, if we were genies in a bottle, is to give us the illusion that there is nothing out there. You know, I think of Plato's cave, you know, Plato's cave. They did not know about the world outside of the cave, and therefore it did not exist. And yet it was there the entire time. And yet it didn't exist because they were told and shown that it didn't exist. The only thing that exists is that shadow on the wall over there. So it just, to me, that paints such a picture of how easy it is to manipulate infinite energy. I mean, it's it's obviously not a good thought to think about, like how this has all been hijacked. But at the same time, it's liberating because you have to get past that thought of shock to all this and move past that into liberation. Because how else is Neo going to wake up from the Matrix unless he's unplugged? You know, the initial shock was so depressing to unplug from the Matrix. He was totally wiped out. And then eventually he came back, and he came back to himself. And then he became an infinite being who was able to manipulate time and energy and matter. But really, he was that the entire time. He was always Neo. He was always the one. But he believed he was a computer programmer who had a 9-to-5 job. So we're all Neo. We're all Neo. And we all believe that we are a 9-to-5. We all believe that we've got to pay this person. It doesn't matter if you have a lot of money either. You still have to pay all these bills, whether you're rich or poor. You're still paying for services. And it's all petty. It's petty stuff. It's just like menial. It's so menial to me when we feel the infinite potential of us. And you know, I'm very connected in dreams. Like I've told you, I've been exploring dreams. And that just is like a whole other universe out there. But I lost my train of thought. But I was saying, yeah, we're all Neo. We're all Neo. And I think it's fear, man. I think it's fear that's keeping people from waking up to the fact that they are the one. What do you think?
Yeah, I think on a level of what we're talking about from us as humans, yeah, it's fear. It's the belief that we're limited. It's also the power structure in our society. It's that "Make America Great Again" mentality of like, this is how it's always been, so it should continue to be that way. Whereas in reality, we're living in a revolutionary and an evolutionary age and world. So it's ignorance of that and the fear that that's true. Because what can happen in evolution is that you can die, but evolution continues and you become something else, which sounds fine, but like that necessitates that you, as an individual, if you believe that's what you are, right? The ultimate addiction in spirituality is the addiction to our own limited ego. The thoughts in our mind that convince us that we are our thoughts, the body that convinces us that we have pain and that we're hungry and that that's what we need to focus on in life and that's it. The desire to have that house. These things are what we're addicted to. Ultimately, all that desire culminates into what you believe that you are. I mean, like, you can call that Josh or Kyle or Steve. So that's what we're ultimately addicted to. So why do we fear evolution? Because that naturally ends. That dissipates into just karma. It becomes karma. But we need to continue as something new after we die. After that dies, we become something new. It could be anything, right? But then it starts over. We believe we're this bear now, or maybe we evolve into something beyond humans that we don't know yet. But equally, we're going to be addicted to it if we also don't believe that we are this, with a capital T, this evolution, this God, this consciousness, this heart with a capital H. So when we live from that, it doesn't ultimately matter what we become in evolution, whether we're a moose or I believe rocks are part of evolution. So it doesn't matter what form you take.
Yeah.
Ultimately, as long as you believe, or as long as you can see that you are that you are this.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, people have to believe they are that. And yet we see every day, you and I, that they are being kept from that constantly through this and everything else. I mean, this is just one facet. But I mean, to be realistic, if we all became the one and realized our oneness, it's not about sitting around kumbayaing with each other. It's about, really starting to harness the power of our infinite energy and believing in a better world. So therefore it is. We must believe that we can achieve a better world and not just watch some dystopian movie about the future only to find out 20, 30 years later that that's happened. Like, what? I mean, I can't even watch media. I used to love movies, man. I grew up loving movies. It was a great escape for me. And then I had to put that aside because I started to feel an awareness that was different. And it was unfortunately, kind of a, party pooper awareness, because I realized that all these narratives were affecting my thoughts and my emotions. And I am an infinite being, so why do I want to subject myself to someone else's narrative that includes all of these subtle imprints throughout it? And I know it's just a movie, but it's not. That's the thing, it's not just a movie. You are living that experience of those characters. And that's why people love movies, because they go there and they live through these actors and they live through the emotions of the actors. And the actors that give the best performances are given an award. Isn't that interesting? The whole concept is like far out to me. It makes sense. But when I think about it in the sense of everything we've been talking about, again, it's another tool to manipulate people and to make them feel that they don't have the power. They don't have the power to create that future timeline of utopia because maybe they've watched movie after movie after movie that has a really crappy ending. You know? And you start watching these narratives over and over. The thing about media and television and movies is that they don't teach us is that it's going into your unconscious mind. Consciously, you can say that is just a movie, it doesn't affect me. And that's true consciously, but unconsciously, all of that media is being fed into your brain and processed as real data. Like, I mean, I can't watch anything like I used to. I wish I could. I'm back. I'm thinking of that guy eating steak in the Matrix who wants to go back to the Matrix and be like, yeah, man, ignorance is bliss. But you just can't go back. Like, you can't go back. He could only go back to the Matrix, actually, now that I think of it, because he had to have his memory erased to go back to the Matrix. He couldn't remember anything because if he remembered, it wouldn't work, which I think is a great analogy to humanity and why humanity does not remember their infinite self. You know, did you ever see the movie Blade Runner?
No, I've heard of it though.
Blade Runner was probably my favorite movie growing up. It's not really a child's movie, but it's all about creating artificial humans or creating man in the image of man. In the sense of the movie, it's, you know, an artificial human. And then it's the process of how do you make that artificial human better over time. And what they learn is that you have to give the human memories. You have to implant the human with memories. So the artificial human believes, again, it's all about belief. So that way the artificial human believes they are human. I mean, it's a really profound movie. I highly recommend Blade Runner if you're going to watch any movie. 1982. And it had a profound impact on me when I was little, I think for this reason, because it is so analogous to humanity. Because here they are, human beings, it's in the future, it takes place in the future. They've advanced science enough where they can genetically engineer human beings in a petri dish, but they have no soul because it's not coming from God, it's coming from, you know, an early trial of science on a planet far, far away, where they're just kind of discovering this technology. And so the first thing they have to do is give it memories. But then some of these artificial humans realize that they were manufactured, that they're not actually from birth. They're not a real birth human. And that creates a huge depression. They become very depressed. And they realize, wow, this has all been a lie. And then in the movie, in the story, they put an artificial lifespan in the artificial human. So they terminate the human after so long because it becomes too self-aware. And I would say they terminate it because it becomes almost a threat, because it becomes too self-aware. So the artificial humans in the movie, they don't live very long. They're given the unplug, and it's programmed into their DNA. And man, does that just sound so analogous to humanity? You know, here we are, we're never given the opportunity. They say wisdom comes to us in our older age, in our elderly age. And yet when you achieve peace and wisdom in your elderly years, the next thing is you die. So why reach that point of transcendence as a human being to only be shut down? Think of what an elderly person who reaches that point of peace and extreme wisdom. Think about that being allowed to stay alive for another 100 years. What could that person achieve? To me, that person could probably achieve amazing things. Amazing things. And unfortunately, it's sad. It's so sad to me that people have to die because they've made it so far. They've made it so far and they've reached a place of peace. So why take that from them? And speaking all of this to you now probably is why I was so attracted to that movie as a kid, because I feel very strongly that that's similar to our world. We just are this infinite energy that was created in the image of God. And we have the potential to become so powerful that we had to be capped. We had to be capped by a death age, an age of decay and shutting down. And now on top of that, humanity has created all these belief systems of lack and limitation and disempowerment on top of the life that we're already living, that is going to be, you know, exterminated based on the DNA programming of our human vessels. So do you ever feel this? Do you ever feel what I'm feeling? You must know.
Yeah, yeah. I feel it's really hard to explain. Um, it's it's almost like, I mean, mostly, you know, I live life as Kyle. Um, but there's this other part of me that's, from what I can tell, it is actually has always been there for me, and it's much more me than Kyle is me. um, Kyle
Mm-hmm.
seems a little bit more foreign than the this that I deeply am.
Mm.
feels much
Mm.
more feels much more familiar to me. And what's crazy is this familiarity is, from what I can tell, you know, I first experienced it as like the moon. Like I really felt like I really connected with the moon. And then I saw that the moonlight is connected to the sun. And like I began to feel like, you know, the sun is actually there, even when it's not, even when it's nighttime, it's still there. It's shining on the moon. And then I began to feel like that these are actual entities, or these are things that, you know, they have gravity, they have being. And like, just like I can obviously feel the gravity of the earth, I began to be pulled into the gravitational pull of the moon, the gravitational pull of the sun. And then I realized how expansive I actually am. That it just doesn't stop. The unlimited, like the nature of consciousness and love and self is so unlimited.
Yeah, I feel it all the time. And that is our I am presence. That is our true self, our true God self. I don't fear that. I embrace it, and I embraced it at a very early age, and it made me isolated in society because people don't stand out in society as their I am presence. You talk about, Kyle is this version of you that's kind of foreign, and that was a great way, I thought, to put it. Because yeah, I'm not Josh. I'm just, living out this really like basic, it seems like pretty basic human life, but I know that this is not me. Are you kidding me? This is not me at all. Because I do have memories, and I can't quite explain it, Kyle, but I remember. And it's not like I can sit here and write down a report for you, but I think the memories are seeping through our emotional bodies. And it's a way for the memories to come back to us. And it's a way for the rubber band to come back to us. Because I feel it every day. I feel the I am presence. I feel that people can't handle their own I am presence, so they water themselves down every day with distractions or with small talk or with a lack of heart connection. That was one thing. I used to work in cafes because I was such a hermit type person that when I got a job as a barista, I thought, wow, this is great because I can actually go out in society and interact with people and, share my energy with people. And it's short term. It's not a big commitment for me. I'm making someone's coffee. I can do that. I can do that. But I was amazed to see how people, and I know older people feel this because I've talked to older people about how the world has changed and how people don't connect like they used to, mostly because of technology. But, being in a coffee shop, it's a very simple concept, and coffee shops are usually synonymous with community, with deep conversation, with connection. And I left that industry because I wasn't witnessing any of that anymore. It was dissipating every day. It seemed like people were unable to connect, and they actually just wanted the coffee. That was it. Their coffee fix was way more important than seeing the Josh barista. And I'm not saying I wanted everyone to love me and just like coming to see Josh. Oh, I don't care about the coffee, but you know what I mean. There was a lack of balance with just people being able to connect, because here I am standing there and I feel my I am presence, and I want to see their I am presence. I want to feel their I am presence. And there seems to be a vulnerability about all of this that is off-putting to people. When you truly stand in your power and you stand in your true God presence, it throws people off, because people usually tend to demean you and say, well, you got a big ego. Who do you think you are, buddy? You're just a human. You're just Josh. You're just Kyle. Don't get too big-headed. And they're misinterpreting because they're projecting ego. They're projecting their ego onto you. They're not actually able to receive your God self because of their projections. They're blinded by their projections. And so many people out there, and I haven't dove into projections and how that actually works, but I know a few people on the top of my head that they project the old version of Josh when they speak to me because it's all they know. And so they don't realize that I've changed. I'm different. And it's okay. It's a good thing. But instead of connecting with my current self, my current I am self, they project the old version of you onto you. Does that make sense? In order to gain a connection with you again, because they don't know how else to connect with you. And but I had to leave making coffee for people because it almost felt like I was around people all the time, but yet I felt more alone than before. And it takes me back to what you said earlier in this video, which is everywhere is the center of the universe. And that is true. I truly believe that. So fortunately, you and me both, man, we've come up with our own coping mechanisms to mitigate all of the disconnection that we see and feel around us in this lifetime. Because we're here and we're strong. You and I are strong, we're here, but we've gotten here because we've had to protect ourselves. We've had to protect ourselves. We can't just say, whatever. But, it's important for us to protect ourselves. And I think you and I both, our oversouls, our higher self, our God presence, whatever you want to call it, we are looking out for each other. And I know that so deeply because there have been so many times in my life where I've been alone in ways, and alone appearing, I would say, alone appearing. It appears that I'm alone, but I know in my heart that I'm not. I know that I'm not alone because my I am presence has introduced himself to me at an earlier age, as he did to you at an earlier age too. So I don't actually feel alone, even though it might look that way. It doesn't feel that way at all. Because like I said, we are infinite energy. Everything is right here, and it doesn't cost a penny. So in that sense, that's really comforting. That is like a really comforting knowing. It's a really comforting belief to know that you're God. You are God. And you can create anything you need when you need it. There's a scene from a movie called, when I was little, it's called The Fly Went in My Mouth.
Oh, gross.
It was a fruit fly.
It's gross.
Yeah, it's a fruit fly. I have it. I don't have any food in here, but it's the plants. I have a bunch of plants, and whenever I water them, they get some little gnats. Anyways, there's a scene from a movie called The Little Princess, which is like an old children's movie, and the two girls are kept up in the attic. It's a boarding school, and they've been made slaves because they don't have any money. So they're not allowed to attend the school, but they're allowed to work as a maid, as a housekeeper. And these girls are the same age as the girls at the school. So they should be with the other girls learning, but they're made to work because they're poor. And they're up in their quarters one night, and they run out of food, and they have no chance of getting food. So what did they do? They created a feast in their imagination. And they sat there, and the one girl started saying, I forget her name, but what are you talking about? There's no sausages there. There's nothing. There's no bread there. There's nothing there. And the girl just kept going and said, don't you see it? Becky was her name. She says, don't you see it? They're there. Can't you smell them? They smell so good. And she kept inspiring Becky to believe in the food that was there in their empty room. And it was such a beautiful scene. And it's interesting that I'm downloading that right now, because I've never thought of that movie in so long. But so the girls ended up having a wonderful night, and they were laughing, and they went to bed happy, even though they were starving, because of their belief. They changed their belief, which changed their whole reality. And I don't know if it's the heart that does that in those times, but the heart of the one girl made her friend believe and convinced her friend truly that there was a feast before their eyes. And I forget what we were talking about before that, what made me think of that scene. But you can see how powerful that is, because it really did change those two girls, and it gave them peace, and they went to bed happy. And I think they started saying, "Oh, I feel so full now. We've been eating all this food for so long." And they're all, they're making it up. As the viewer, as the observer of the movie, you're like, well, they're just making this stuff up to make themselves feel better. But I guess it just shows, the power of us to change the space around us and change how we feel, how we feel about things. And actually the next day when they woke up the next morning, there was a real feast in the room, because a man from India who was the neighbor, he was actually watching the girls from his house, and he saw that the girls were slaves, and he saw that they were hungry, and he snuck into their room at night, and he put a feast out for them as they slept, and they woke up to real warm sausages and mashed potatoes in silver. I mean, it was like nice. It wasn't in Tupperware. And this man, this Indian man, he was the observer, and he changed their reality by observing their reality from afar. So if you and I, your higher self, Kyle, my higher self, we're observing each other. You're observing Kyle from afar. I'm observing Josh from afar. And it seems that all we're given is the imprint, the impression. Because obviously, well, I love your name because it seems like as time goes on, we are continually downloading ourselves into our vessels. And this download is constant. And as time goes on, we keep downloading and downloading. So think about the infinite well of data and knowledge that we have access to through our heart that will forever keep downloading to the point where we really don't need much technology as we think we do. It's wonderful for things like this and speaking with you. It's wonderful for so many things, but at the same time, we do seem to have this connection to a data center that's maybe outside this space. And this data center has a connection to us because we are a spark of God. And because of that small connection, as minute a particle as it might be, it's enough. It's enough to begin the download. Oh man. How are you feeling?
This is a great conversation. This was really good. Thanks for joining.
Yeah. This was great. I had a bunch of questions and I really didn't even get to much because it's so easy to talk to you that it's a good practice, but yeah, it's just so easy to talk to you, man. And I really appreciate that that you are you, and I appreciate that you never gave up on yourself and gave in to something maybe that was someone else's belief or dream or projection of what they wanted you to be. I appreciate your integrity in this life to be a spiritual teacher. It's really powerful. It's really powerful what you do. And I feel it, and I wish you got a lot more recognition because I mean, the world needs you more than ever. The world, I think COVID is going to assist with all that. It's going to help people wake up eventually. But yeah, I just really appreciate you, man.
Appreciate you too. Thank you so much for this idea. And it's crazy that we're even like how we became friends, even though we've never met.
I know.
In person. So thanks. I mean, technology can have its negative aspects, but also has unlimited, it can help us with unlimited potential to connect across the world.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, for me as more of a recluse, it's really great. But making friends for even spiritual, like from my experience, finding friends of the spiritual nature has been really hard because there's a lot of spiritual ego that clouds a lot of these gurus that I pick up on, and I'm sure you pick up on it too. There's so much of this spiritual ego out there that unfortunately muddies the water. And yeah, so I thank you, and I thank you for your purity to not give in to these more programs. You know, you really are standing in your integrity and staying there. Yeah, and I really respect that. I'm doing the same thing, you know. So yeah, I really appreciate what you do. And
Yeah.
don't get a big spiritual ego.
Yeah. Well, I'm trying not to, that's for sure. I mean, the thing is, it's so attractive to, like, you know, say, oh guys, I've awakened, I'm enlightened, now I can be your guru. I can start an ashram and people can come give me money, and that's
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I've seen so many gurus as you've watched on YouTube that have advanced in their followings and therefore advanced in their business models. And then it becomes a question of it becomes a question of where's the integrity to your original vision when now you're making so much money, or you have so much attention and so much popularity and access to, you know, people and you know, sex, drugs, rock and roll, whatever, you know, whatever the person might want to indulge in. I've seen that so many times, man. It just seems like it's so easy for people to just give in, whether it's a big payout or, you know, a big contract. And you hear about it from musicians and people in the music industry that come out after the fact and said they had to sell out, and, you know, all their music is owned by someone else because they became a tool under a contract. And, you know, so maintain your integrity, you know, be true to yourself, but I know you will. So
yeah, thank you, thank you. And that's just a reminder of how important spiritual practice is. Like, just sticking with, you know, I mean, spiritual practice really humbles you, is like that's one of the main things. Like, yes, it awakens you, but even more importantly is that it humbles you. So sticking with that, whether you're a student or a teacher or a student teacher, I like to identify as a student teacher, but
I like that. It's a very yes and no answer.
yeah. Are you a seeker or a teacher? Well, I'm basically both.
I believe it. You are. I believe in yes and no all the time. The quantum universe, it transcends the polarity. Everything is yes, everything is no, everything is true, everything is false. It's just based on perception, belief, and observation. So you are the student teacher as long as you believe you are.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I'm imagining bedtime, a little bit of a snack, and then I'm imagining some bedtime.
Me too. Me too. What are you gonna snack on?
Oh, tortilla chips for sure.
Nice.
Yeah.
Dip? Any dip?
Probably some hummus. I honestly just got back into town. I was at my parents' house over the weekend, so I know I have chips. I just got to make sure if I have like hummus or salsa. Probably salsa.
Nice. Yeah, I'm gonna make some naan bread. You know, the naan. I've got some garlic naan bread, and I'm gonna toast that up and put on some some red pepper paste and some cheese.
Want to hear a philosophy joke?
Yeah.
So I was in logic class, and we were always talking about like the things that are the opposite of something else. So I was like, well, what the heck is opposite? And then like I was like, do you guys know what the opposite of bread is? Non-bread.
Oh my God, I've never heard that. That's awesome.
I love little cheesy teacher jokes like that.
That's great. Yeah, I'm not. I don't know many jokes, but that's a good one. Yeah, I'm hooked on non-bread, man. It's so good.
It's so good.
toasted with some butter, and I like spiciness, so I put some red pepper paste, and sometimes I put some cashews or something, or some cheese on it. I crush up cashews, put some nuts on it.
Oh,
But
nice. Are you vegetarian?
no, not anymore. I was a vegetarian for probably 2, 3 years, but I noticed my body started feeling pretty weak.
Same with me. Same with me.
Yeah,
I like became strict vegetarian, and then like I started to incorporate meat a little bit, but still like I would get sick and stuff like that, and not having energy, and like I have restless legs. I don't know if you get like that sense where like I just have to move my legs and jitter around.
magnesium. Do you take magnesium?
No, I don't do much supplements.
Magnesium's really good for restless leg. It's a very calming for the nervous system. I'm really good with nutrition, so I know all about that stuff. But yeah, magnesium will take care of that.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I'll go check that out at the food co-op tomorrow.
Oh, nice. You got the food co-op.
Yeah,
Nice.
yeah, it's
Stay
a good.
local. Well, enjoy your tortillas, man. It was a pleasure.
Yeah, big pleasure. Yep, peace and love to you.
Yeah, peace and love, man.